All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to jump into one of the most, well, frankly, jaw-dropping economic stories of the entire 20th century.
So, we're talking about the East Asian tigers, and the big question is, how did some of the poorest countries on Earth suddenly become economic giants? I mean, it really felt like it happened overnight. And let me tell you, the answer? Well, it challenges pretty much everything we think we know about how countries get rich.
Okay, so first up, the East Asian miracle, from poverty to prosperity. You really have to picture this. In the middle of the 20th century, places like South Korea and Taiwan were poor, really poor, facing just immense challenges. But then, something incredible happened. They just took off. We're talking explosive year-after-year growth that nobody saw coming. It completely defied the odds, and honestly, it reshaped the entire global economy.
Which brings us to our next section, a free market fairy tale? We're going to do a little myth-busting here. So, how on earth did they pull this off? Well, for decades, there was this one very simple, very powerful story that everybody told, especially during the Cold War. You could almost call it a fairy tale.
And that story went something like this. It was all about pure, unadulterated capitalism, free trade, and a government that just stayed out of the way. You know, these countries were held up as these shining examples of the free market at work. Their success was presented as this huge win for getting the government out of the economy, letting the market work its magic. A simple, clean victory for capitalism over communism.
But here's the twist. As economists and historians started to look a lot closer, a very, very different picture emerged. That whole free market story? Turns out it was mostly a myth. The reality was that this success wasn't about a hands-off government. No way. It was the exact opposite. It was driven by a powerful, incredibly hands-on developmental state.
And that brings us to the real secret sauce here, the state's secret playbook, and specifically, the power of this developmental state. This one concept is the absolute key that unlocks how the East Asian miracle was actually engineered.
So, what exactly is a developmental state? Think of it like this. A typical government might act like a referee in a sports game. It enforces the rules but doesn't play. A developmental state, on the other hand, is like the coach and the star player rolled into one. It's not passive at all. It's an active, energetic partner with businesses, strategically driving the entire country toward rapid growth. For instance, it might give cheap loans to a new electronics company while protecting it from huge foreign competitors.
This quote here really gets to the heart of it. It wasn't just that the state intervened. Lots of governments do that. The crucial part was its ability to effectively direct money and resources toward building up industries. The state wasn't just a regulator with a rulebook, it was the strategic architect of the whole national economy.
Now, to really understand why this worked so well in East Asia, it's super helpful to compare it to Latin America at the same time. There, governments were often stuck, caught between powerful interest groups like strong unions, influential businesses, and big landlords. In East Asia, by contrast, the state was much more independent. It had the power to make these coherent, long-term plans and actually see them through without getting sidetracked.
But, and this is a big but, the state didn't do this in a vacuum, which brings us to Section 4, a window of opportunity. These developmental states were smart, but they were also a bit lucky. They seized a unique moment in global history, a perfect window of opportunity. Their rise started during a massive expansion in the world economy. These so-called newly industrializing countries, or NICs, found their perfect niche. They became the world's workshop, churning out manufactured goods. And this growth was also massively fueled by Cold War politics. The United States had a huge interest in supporting these non-communist economies, so it provided investment and, crucially, access to its gigantic market.
And the result of all this? It was just staggering. In a little over a decade, they tripled their share of global manufactured exports. I mean, think about that. That just shows how incredibly successful their state-led strategies were at plugging them right into that booming global economy.
On top of that, there was a unique internal recipe at play here, a special mix of cultural and historical factors, like a shared heritage, a history of strong states, and a powerful sense of nationalism, often made stronger by external threats, created societies that were really prepared for this kind of intense, state-led national project.
However, this economic miracle came at a really steep price. And this brings us to the dark side of the story, the part that's often left out when we talk about this incredible growth.
Let's be very clear about this. For most of this high-growth period, these countries were not democracies.
They were ruled by authoritarian regimes. Political freedoms, labor rights, and basic human rights were all heavily suppressed, all in the name of stability and economic development.
And the environmental devastation was just as severe. This relentless drive for rapid, unchecked industrialization led to an absolute crisis of pollution. Just look at these figures from Taiwan. Rivers poisoned, farmland polluted. It got so bad that even the food supply, the rice itself, was contaminated with heavy metals. It was a catastrophe.
Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought. The developmental state created an undeniable economic miracle, but it was built on a foundation of authoritarian control and environmental sacrifice, all happening during a unique window in global history. So for any nation today hoping to follow in those footsteps, the questions are huge. Can you have the growth without the terrible costs? And maybe more importantly, was this a once-in-a-lifetime model that can never be repeated?